again with Beachmont Ford and Beachmont Ford Performance. Out here in the garage one more time for an episode of Garage Table Discussion. Got a special guest for you today. This gentleman is Chris Gillespie, and Chris is one of our partners over at WeaponX. And WeaponX is actually the shop that does all of our builds for us. And so we thought I'd bring in Chris today and talk about basically the build process. And Chris, thanks for coming in.
No problem.
You're kind of our partner on our end, and you're more or less the specialist doing the Mustangs and the F-150s, correct?
Yep, so the biggest thing at WeaponX is we actually have two technicians that do a majority of the installations. It's John is one technician, and then myself. Because we can get busy enough when we sell enough vehicles that we need the extra help of one more technician, and it helps out trying to get the cars back to the customer as soon as we can.
Right, okay. So if you don't mind, why don't we give everybody a little bit of background on how you got into this to begin with?
So back in high school, a little bit different scenario than the majority of car fans myself is my mom wouldn't let me own a V8 vehicle, so I couldn't go to the drag strip and show off what I had or anything like that. So finally, about junior year, they got into it, and I found a way around it by chipping in on a 67 Mustang, and if I did the V8 swap into it, now I had a V8 vehicle, but unfortunately ended up being a big rust bucket. I was into, the funniest thing is I finally got it all put together, and the front tires were so cambered out that it would squeal the entire way I drove it down the road. And what I found out was I bought a strut tower brace, which was pretty important in those vehicles. They go from the firewall to the strut towers.
Yeah.
I put that thing on, it mounted up to the firewall, but the passenger side would line up, but the driver's side, the shock tower, was actually moved out almost a full inch because the frame was so rusted out.
Oh,
so
wow. Okay.
that kind of ended my dreams of owning the big muscle car that I wanted to, and I ended up selling it, but it got me hooked on working on cars, and I learned a lot, and I decided it's what I wanted to do for my career. So I ended up going to the University of Northwestern Ohio, bachelor's degree in applied science, and got my automotive technician certification. But the biggest thing that they had going on there was a high performance program. So I was working with the engine dynos, the chassis dynos, and honestly, it was a great education for getting me started. And what I fell in love with there was the engine machining and assembly side of things there. So as soon as I got out of college, I worked at a machine shop for quite a bit of time, learned a lot of the minute details that go into building engines and camshaft profiles work and this RPM range. I started learning a lot on the engine machining side of things.
Wow.
But I decided I wanted to work on the whole car instead of just the small engine itself. It's just a minute detail of the vehicle itself.
Yeah.
So that's when I started at a Mustang performance shop all the way up in Norwalk, Ohio. They got my feet wet. It was a whole lot of fun, but when I got married, my wife was at Ohio State at the time, came back down to Cincinnati, and started again in a high-performance shop, mostly doing Ford stuff. Ended up at another machine shop for a little bit, because the Mustang engine evolved a lot between graduating in 2008 and moved back to Cincinnati, 2010 area. I mean, the engine changed a lot.
Drastically, yes, correct.
And so between moving around, I finally settled down into... The machining just kind of got old for a little bit, so I finally settled down. I'm going to keep working my way through performance shops, finding the right fit, and working on the entire car, and that's why I'm here where I am now.
Wow. Well, we had talked a little bit off camera. I have had my share of the 1960s Mustangs, and, I never fashioned myself as a mechanic, but I could work on those cars. The newer cars... I'm not even touching. I don't even change my own oil anymore. It's just to that point. And in my job at the dealership, I am more of the traffic controller for builds. I'm not the tech guy. When it comes to that, I go to this guy. So I facilitate all the builds, but this is the guy that actually does the builds and knows what we're doing. So now you're at WeaponX and you're working on all of our builds. So we'll keep it simple here. We do Roush superchargers and Whipple superchargers. How about we talk a little bit about what the difference might be for people that are looking at a performance build and why?
Yeah, so when you're looking at the Roush superchargers themselves, you can definitely find a bunch of information on everybody's website when comparing it to Whipple, but the biggest thing is the displacement of the blower. It's obviously smaller than the 3-liter Whipple, but the biggest selling point of the Roush is definitely the warranty. The 3-year, 36,000 mile, I believe, is what they offer.
That's huge.
Which is ideal for a customer that is just getting into the high performance market or niche, if you wanted to call it that. Someone who's never owned a supercharged vehicle before, and finally they can afford it, or their friends have one and now they want to get their feet wet into it. It's definitely a perfect package for someone that just wants to get started in the high performance, their fun thing to do.
Right.
Where compared to Whipple, it's a much larger blower. You can still get it with a warranty, but it's got a lot more to offer as far as upgrades available in the future. Just with the displacement of the blower, it's going to make more power with a 3-liter, and they continue to develop their blower year after year after year. The biggest thing, I think, kind of fighting the Roush as far as making power is the intake air temps. They're still doing it the old-fashioned way, where the blower blows the air through the center. You have a very small intercooler brick in the manifold. It can only cool as much as possible. Mm-hmm. The biggest thing with the Whipple is that it's come out now for the newer blowers and the newer vehicles, and what they're actually starting to adapt into the older vehicles is this dual pass intercooler that they kind of developed, where the supercharger actually blows air up through the first intercooler. It comes around the top, which is why the blowers look so big now,
yeah.
And then it's cooled a second time through a second set of bricks, and then it goes into the cylinders. We're seeing intake air temps of 120 degrees and even cooler on those nice fall autumn days where you really like to drive the car.
Yeah.
Where the Roushes just can't quite get there, and that's just because of the different style of blowers.
Yeah.
Also, when you get into some specifics, Roush RPM limit is typically around 64 to 6,700. There's a speed limiter there where if you go with Whipple, they let you rev it out a little bit farther, and for these engines that love to rev to such high RPMs, it makes a power difference for sure.
Right. Okay, so please join us again this afternoon around 2 o'clock for our second part of our discussion with Chris Gillespie from WeaponX Motorsports. And we'll discuss a little bit more about the build process with Beachmont 4 Performance. All right, we'll see you then.